A warm cup of safety. As I closed the door behind me, the first thing that caught my eye was a sign that read Safe Haven. I made the right choice, I thought, my heart still racing from the events outside. The room was filled with the comforting scent of autumn, cinnamon, nutmeg, and pumpkin spice. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the familiar smells calm me, as if I had just stepped out of a nightmare and into a cozy, safe space. The air was also thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and I turned to confirm that I had indeed stumbled into a small cafe. The tables were empty, which wasn't surprising given the late hour. The only other person in the room was the woman behind the counter. "I'm sorry, but we're about to close," as she began, but then paused, her expression softening. "Are you okay?" I held up the sign, still trying to catch my breath. "Is this true?" She glanced at the sign and nodded. "Yes, absolutely. Please, come in and sit down. I'll lock the door right away." I found a table near the back, far enough from the door to feel safe but not so cornered that I couldn't make a quick exit if needed. As I sat down, I heard the sound of multiple locks clicking into place. "That should do it," as she said, walking back toward me. I double-locked everything. "Are you sure you're okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "I'm fine now," I replied, still trying to steady my breathing. "I just need a moment to calm down. I'm not much of a runner." She smiled sympathetically. "I get it. Running's not for everyone. Can I get you something to drink? Water, maybe?" "Water would be great," I said, my voice still shaky. "And whatever smells so good." She chuckled, a little embarrassed. "Oh, that's just me testing out some new drinks for tomorrow's menu. You can be my first taste tester if you'd like. I'll grab that water." She hurried behind the counter, and I couldn't help but notice how flustered she seemed. Was she blushing? I shook the thought away, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. After all, I had just met her, and the stress of the evening was probably making me read too much into things. She returned with a glass of water and set it down in front of me. "I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Rachel." "Prue," I replied, taking a sip of the water. "Thanks for letting me crash in here." "No problem, Prue. What happened out there?" I sighed, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease a little. I was walking to the bus stop when a group of guys started harassing me. They were drunk, and things got uncomfortable. I told them to back off, but they didn't take it well. So, I ran. Rachel's expression darkened. "I'm so sorry that happened. You're safe here, though. If they come around, I'll make sure they don't bother you again." Her words were comforting, and I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the cozy atmosphere of the cafe. "Thank you," I said softly. "I really appreciate it." "Do you still want to try one of those drinks?" she asked, her tone lightening again. I smiled. "Sure. What do you recommend?" "Well, I've got a few new ones. There's a caramel marshmallow latte, a maple latte, and my personal favorite, the vanilla spice latte. It's made with Colombian coffee, vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg." "That sounds perfect," I said. "I'll try the vanilla spice." Rachel grinned and headed back to the counter to prepare the drinks. As I watched her work, I couldn't help but admire her confidence and the way she moved with ease around the cafe. There was something about her that made me feel safe, like I had known her for longer than just a few minutes. She returned with 2 steaming cups and set one in front of me. "Vanilla spice for you, and a maple latte for me. In case you want to try it." I took a sip of the vanilla spice latte, and it was like drinking autumn in a cup. Warm, comforting, and exactly what I needed. This is amazing, I said, savoring the flavors. Rachel smiled, clearly pleased. I'm glad you like it. Want to try the maple? I nodded and took a sip of her drink. It was good, but I had to admit, the vanilla spice was still my favorite. It's nice, but I think I'm sticking with mine. We both laughed, and for a moment, the tension from earlier seemed to melt away. I felt a connection forming between us, something unspoken but undeniable. I wasn't sure if it was just the relief of finding a safe place or something more, but I didn't want the night to end. You know, Rachel said after a pause, I don't think it's safe for you to walk home alone. I can give you a ride if you'd like. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'd appreciate that. Or, she added, her voice softening, you could stay at my place. I have a guest room. No pressure, of course. I looked at her, surprised by the offer but also touched by her kindness. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be, she said quickly. I just want to make sure you're safe. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. Okay. I'll stay. Rachel's face lit up, and I knew I had made the right choice. As we left the cafe together, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Maybe it was the safety of the locked doors, or maybe it was the company of someone who genuinely cared. Either way, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and cookies baking in the oven. Rachel was already bustling around the kitchen, and I couldn't help but smile. It felt like the beginning of something new, something good. The smell of freshly baked cookies and brewing coffee filled the air, pulling me from the comfort of sleep. For a moment, I forgot where I was, but then the events of the previous night came rushing back. The cafe, Rachel, the warmth of her kindness. I sat up in the guest room, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, and smiled. It felt like I had stepped into a different world, one where I didn't have to constantly look over my shoulder. I stretched and got out of bed, pulling on the cozy sweater Rachel had lent me the night before. The apartment was small but charming, with mismatched furniture that somehow fit together perfectly. I could hear Rachel humming softly in the kitchen, and the sound made me feel at ease. As I stepped into the kitchen, Rachel turned around, her face lighting up when she saw me. Good morning. I hope you slept well. I did, I said, smiling back. Thank you again for letting me stay. I don't know what I would have done without you. Rachel waved her hand dismissively. It was no trouble at all. I'm just glad you're okay. Coffee? Please, I said, sitting down at the small kitchen table. And those cookies smell amazing. Rachel grinned as she poured 2 cups of coffee. They're my specialty. Chocolate chip with a hint of cinnamon. I make them fresh every morning for the cafe. I took a sip of the coffee she handed me, savoring the rich, smooth flavor. You really know your way around a kitchen. She laughed, setting a plate of warm cookies in front of me. It's my happy place. Baking, making coffee, running the cafe, it's what I love. I took a bite of one of the cookies, and it was like a little piece of heaven. These are incredible, I said, my mouth full. I might have to come by every morning just for these. Rachel's eyes sparkled. I wouldn't mind that at all. There was a comfortable silence between us as we ate breakfast, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled with words. I felt a strange sense of belonging, like I had known Rachel for much longer than just a day. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. So, Rachel said after a while, breaking the silence. What's your plan for today? I shrugged, suddenly feeling a little lost. I don't know. I guess I should head home at some point, but I'm not really in a rush. Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. I mean it. I looked at her, trying to read the emotions behind her words. There was something unspoken between us, something that had been there since the moment I stepped into her cafe. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this connection than just kindness. Thank you, I said softly. I really appreciate it. Rachel smiled, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Nervousness, maybe? She cleared her throat and stood up, gathering the empty plates. I should probably head to the cafe soon. I've got a busy day ahead. I nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment. I didn't want the morning to end, didn't want to leave this little bubble of safety and warmth. But I also didn't want to overstay my welcome. I can help you open up, I offered, standing up as well. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me. Rachel looked surprised but pleased. Are you sure? You don't have to. I want to, I said, smiling. Besides, I need more of that vanilla spice latte in my life. She laughed, and the tension between us seemed to ease. All right, then. Let's get going. The cafe was quiet when we arrived, the early morning light casting a soft glow through the windows. Rachel unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open, and I followed her inside, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. It was like stepping back into the safety of the night before, but this time, the fear and anxiety were gone. Rachel busied herself behind the counter, preparing the coffee machines and setting out the fresh cookies. I watched her work, admiring the way she moved with such ease and confidence. There was something calming about her presence, something that made me feel like everything was going to be okay. Do you want to learn how to make the vanilla spice latte? Rachel asked, glancing over at me with a playful smile. I grinned. Absolutely. She walked me through the process, showing me how to grind the coffee beans, steam the milk, and adjust the right amount of vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg. It was more complicated than I had expected, but Rachel was patient, guiding me through each step with a smile. By the time I finished, I had a steaming cup of vanilla spice latte in my hands, and I couldn't help but feel a little proud of myself. Not bad for a first try, right? Rachel took a sip and nodded approvingly. You're a natural. We spent the next hour working side by side, preparing for the morning rush. It was surprisingly fun, and I found myself enjoying the simple tasks of setting out pastries and brewing coffee. There was something satisfying about the routine, something that made me feel grounded. As the first customers started trickling in, I took a seat at one of the tables, sipping my latte and watching Rachel interact with the regulars. She was warm and friendly with everyone, her smile never wavering. It was clear that she loved what she did, and the customers loved her for it. I couldn't help but feel a little envious of the way she had built this life for herself, a life filled with purpose and connection. It was something I had been missing for a long time, and I wasn't sure how to find it again. After the morning rush died down, Rachel came over to sit with me, wiping her hands on her apron. So, what did you think? Could you see yourself working in a cafe? I laughed. I don't know if I'm cut out for it, but it was fun. Rachel smiled, but there was a hint of something more in her expression, something that made my heart skip a beat. I'm glad you stayed, as she said softly. I looked at her, feeling that same unspoken connection between us. Me too. For a moment, we just sat there, the world around us fading into the background. I wasn't sure what was happening between us, but I knew I didn't want it to end. There was something about Rachel that made me feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Like I could be myself with her, without fear or judgment. I was thinking, Rachel said, breaking the silence, and maybe we could grab dinner tonight? If you're free, I mean. My heart fluttered at the invitation, and I smiled. I'd love that. Rachel's face lit up, and I knew that this was just the beginning of something new, something good. Type your message here.